Hello, so in this video we are starting with iteration number 2, building the help screen. We still follow the app development process. So we say step number 1 is the problem formulation, and in which we define the exact scope of this iteration, and we'll say here, and maybe instead of saying this one, this is iteration number 2, step number 1. So the scope is to create, actually it's two things. We need to set up the project navigation. So I'm going to build the navigation for all three screens and then create the help screen. And the help screen has two things: information about how to play the game, and opportunity for the user to practice the note, to practice the sound of each note. And how are we going to test that? So the user will play the note, and we can and then we test the actual note file. So we're gonna have to test outside the app. Like, want to know if the user said I want to play note A, if the app actually did play note A or if played note C. So we're gonna have to play the files outside, let's say from QuickTime or even iTunes, not iTunes, or from within Xcode. So we play the sound from there, we play it from within the app, and compare the two to make sure that it is the correct sound. We can also have the app log the name of the file that it plays. So we can use the log for that as well. So these are two things we can use to test the scope. Step number 2 is the solution formulation. So we start with the model. And the model here, we have an MP3 music file that the app needs to play. So we're going to represent this MP3 music file with the AV audio player library. At this time, I do recommend that you spend some time in the documentation and the API to learn more about the AV audio player library. So if you go to Xcode, go to Window and click on documentation and API, and you go and search for AV audio player. And look at the class reference for the AV audio player. And it gives you some information about what it is and what it can do, and give you a list of tasks that you can do. So it says how you can initialize it. And here is one. It's initialized with content of a URL. And we can use that to initialize it. It has play. And it has a stop and pause and many different things in here that we may not need all of it, but we definitely need to initialize it, and we need the play. I mentioned before, and I want to mention it again, that your strength as an app developer is relatively corresponds directly to your knowledge about the libraries, both the iOS libraries and other libraries that are available, what it can do, and how you can use it. So that's for the MP3 music file. That's the only model that we need to really look at in this particular iteration. The instructions to play the game, you can put that as a model, but it's some text. And it's a static test. You can say, well, this is a one-time text, so we don't have to really worry about it in development time. Or if you want to model it, you can model it as a string, and we have dealt with text before in previous projects. Coming to the view, So in the previous video, I showed you a sketch of what each one of the views will be. In the help screen, the user will come to the help screen from a previous screen. So there will be a back button here. And then you can say, well, we'll put some instructions on how to play the game. And we need a way for the user to practice. So what I will offer here is a series of buttons. Each one has the name of the note and so on. And the user click on the button and they hear the sound of that note. That's all what the help screen needs to provide. Then they can click back to go back to the main screen. So this is coming from main screen. This then means in the view we need a label. Maybe I can get a different color here. So this will be a UI label. And we've used that before. It's a multi-line, so we need to do like maybe 6 lines or something. These can be the UI button, which we used in the unit conversion project, and that is all. To construct the view of the app, and we said there's a main screen, and the main screen will have a button that takes the user to the stats screen, and it will have another button that takes the user to the help screen, and this will be our main screen. In order to manage this navigation, we will need to embed the main screen view in the UI navigation controller and use the UI storyboard segue to transition from the main screen to the help and the main screen to the stats. And once you are on the help screen, then the user can interact with it and then go back to the view. Finally, the controller. So each one of the screens will have its own controller, and we have done that a little bit in project number 2, in module 2, the color palette project, and we'll do it extensively here because we have 3 screens. If we follow the single view template in Xcode, it's going to create one view for us. Then we have to add 2 views, each one of them with its own custom controller. So we're going to use our custom controller. The user will navigate to the help screen. So we are focusing here on the help screen. In the help screen, what needs to happen is the user needs to see instructions, and when they click on a button, they will hear the note that corresponds to this button. So we have an event. When the app loads, it will show the instructions, and this we can set that up from the storyboard, or we can set it in the view did load, depending on how you're going to manage the actual text that goes in the instruction. So we can do it in the storyboard or in design time, or you can use the view did load event if you would like this to change when the when the app loads. To play the sound, so this is for the instructions. To play the sound, the user will click on a button. So the event for this will be the click of a button. And we're going to give the user a button for each node. So when the user clicks on a button, this will trigger an event. The operating system captures the event and notifies a function. So we're going to need to add an action function to play a sound. If I build the I can have a function for each one of the nodes, or I can make one function for all of them. If I make the text on the button to be the same as the name of the MP3 file. If I do that, when the user click on a button, I can retrieve that text, use it as the file name, and load that file and play the note. If I do it this way, then I only need one function, but that function needs a parameter. So it will need to be a function, let's say play sound, but it will need a parameter that will have which button was created or was clicked. So we can say this is a sender as a UI button. If you recall from project number 2, we can, when we build this function as an interface builder action function, Xcode can do that for us. We can specify the argument, what we want to send. In project number 3, we did not select any arguments. Here, we will select an argument and say, we would like to know which button the user clicked and grab that button so we can retrieve the actual text that's on this button and use it as the file name. Inside this function, to play a sound, we're going to use this method, the init with content, or the initialization method where with a content of URL, and this is a type of NSURL. So we're going to have to create an NSURL with the type, and if I clicked on NSURL to go to its documentation to learn about it, and here it tells you a little bit of how you can initialize it. So you can get a file URL with path, and or if you remember the NS bundle, we used the NS bundle in previous projects in project 1 and project 2 to load the resource. And this NS bundle, we used this method before, path for resource of type, and look right above it, there is actually a method, another function called URL for resource with extension, which is the same as a type. So instead of using the path for resource, which gives you back a string, if you recall, it gives us back a string, we can use the URL, which gives us back a URL. So this will be more suitable for the file, whereas the other one was suitable when we loaded an array. So we're going inside this method to retrieve the name of the file from the argument. And then get a reference to the bundle. You already know that now. The app bundle. And get the file, the URL for the file location using the file name from here. Notice that it needs an extension, so we need to know what the extension is, and in this case all the files are with MP3 extension. If you had different extensions, then you have to find a way to get that extension as well. Then we'll need to create the sound file to the AV audio player object and play the sound. Or not create, we need to initialize the audio player object with the file location, which is the URL for the file, and then play the sound. So the implementation of this will follow the same steps. So first we'll set up the project. Then we set up the navigation. Then we'll add the label with instructions. And then we'll add just one button to play, let's say, the A note, which will be in a file called a.mp3, and then add the rest of the buttons. If this one proved correctly or worked correctly, add the rest of the buttons of the notes. All right, so let's go ahead and start. So we already have Xcode here. So I'll go and say File, New, New Project. And it's a single view application. Then give it a name. So I usually use my last name for class, and then we'll call this the Music Learning App. The rest of the information, Xcode will use the last settings that you had. Then next, choose a location where you want to save this and create the project. So the project is created. I'm going to change the launch screen file in the configuration into the main storyboard. I'm not going to use the launch screen, so there's no point of making it show. So first step is to set up the navigation. So I go to the storyboard, and in the storyboard there's one view. I'm going to first set it up to have the iPhone or the phone layout. So change the layout to the phone. And this view is already created by the template. So I have one view and I have one controller linked to that view. I need to add two more. I need to add a view controller for the help screen and the statistics and set up the navigation. So first, let's embed this view controller in an NS, in a UI navigation controller. So I go to Editor, Embed in Navigation Controller. So this adds a navigation controller, moves the starting point to be that navigation controller, which is an invisible part, and then it adds the view controller here for me. So I can go ahead and add the two views. Just change the zoom, press Control and click inside. So I need to add a view controller. This will work as my statistics view controller, and then another one which will work as my help view controller. Before I proceed connecting them, each one of those comes default. If you click on the identity inspector, they are defaulted to the library class UI view controller. Both of them are like that. However, the template made a custom controller for us and linked it here, and I need to do the same for each one of those. So I create a file, right click on the project name and say new file. Then go to iOS source. Previous project I used Swift file, which give you an empty Swift file. Here we'll use the Coca Touch class, and then next, and it will ask you what is the name of the class and what a subclass of it. The Coca Touch class gives you a template that can help you with some of the basic functions of the class, so you don't have to create it manually. This asks you a subclass of, which is what are you building it on from the library. Since we want this to be a view controller, we're going to build it based upon the UI view controller. So it should be a subclass of UI view controller. What is the language? We are using Swift, so this will be Swift language. And what do you want to name it? So it is conventional to keep view controller so that you know that the job of this class is to be a view controller. So I'm going to say help. So this means that this will be used as the help view controller, and then click next. It will ask you where you want to save it and what group you want it to be part of. So I'm going to make it part of the same group here, and then create. So a file is added, and as you can see, it is set up with the UI view controller. It is set up with the view did load, the did receive memory warning, so it doesn't come, and it has even the prepare for segue, but it is commented out. Back to the storyboard, click on the help view controller and go to the identity inspector under custom class and link the help view controller. You see it here in the drop down, link it to this class, and you see the name here, switch it to help view controller. Now we need to do exactly the same for the stats view controller. So file, new file, and under iOS source Coca Touch class, and we're gonna call this the stats view controller. It's a subclass of UI view controller using the language Swift. Next, make sure it is in this group, and this is where we're gonna save it. Then click create, and here is the other file, exactly the same as the first. So we go to the view controller, mark it, and you see how it is blue to indicate that it is selected. In the custom class, choose the stats view controller. So what I did here, I added two view controllers. I linked them to custom controller classes. I created the classes and linked it to them. Next, I need to finish the navigation by adding on the main screen how the user will navigate to each of these two classes. So to do this, I need to zoom in on the main screen, and you can do navigation from these two the bar button items like we did in project or module number 2, or you can add some button here as the mockup. I'm gonna follow the mockup that was created, but you don't have to do that. So I'm gonna add a button here, and in the attributes of that button, I am going to change the text, and I'm gonna call it stats. You can change the font, you can change the color, and so on. You can use an image as well. And I'm gonna add another one, and this one will be the help. I'm gonna use one of the system help like information, and I'm gonna use this one, information button, to indicate that this is the help button. Then click on the button, click on the control key, drag to the help view controller. You see how it is highlighted there. I'm gonna cancel this and turn this off so you can see it. Here is the help view controller. So click on the button, drag from the button to the help view controller. You see how it's all selected, release, and it tells you what type of segue. So we'll use the show segue. And we'll do the same for the stats. So click on the stat button, control, drag, and click show segue. So now there are two segues that are added. If you want to use prepare for segue and you want to do something different in each one of them, you can identify the segue. So if you click on one of the segues, and in the attributes you can give it a name. It is a good practice to give it a name. So we can call this stats segue. And if you click on the other one, we can call the other one help segue. Now that we set it up, let's try it. So we click run, and it loads the app with the navigation. First time you load the simulator, it takes some time. And we'll wait for the simulator. What I am doing here, I am testing the iteration to make sure that it worked. So here is the app coming with two buttons. If you click on the stats, it takes you to the stats view. You click on help, it takes you to the help view, and you can go back from each one of them. So that shows you that the navigation is done or is completed. So I am done with setting up the project, setting up the navigation, And I will stop here in this video, and in the next video we'll go through the remaining three parts of this iteration.